Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPautos.com, your libertarian car guy. This is, I think, the fourth video that I've done so far about driving the 25 Volkswagen ID Buzz. And some good news to report this morning. This is the day after they dropped it off. When I left it parked last night, it indicated I had 142 miles of driving range. This morning, even though I did not plug it in, and more about that in a minute, it says I have 144 miles. I don't know how that could be, but I'm happy to see it's got a little bit more mileage. I opened up the glove box and look what I found. It's like a handheld little air conditioning unit, and I have to think VW provides this because using the AC in this thing tends to sap the charge pretty badly. Okay, we're gonna get going now. Let's see if the range changes as I move. Anyway, so that brings up the other subject. As it turns out, this vehicle was left without a charge cord for me to plug the thing in at home. This is the second time it's happened. I'm wondering whether that's a trend. Not the second time with Volkswagen. I had an Acura EV a few months back, and when I went to plug the thing in at my house, I couldn't find the charge cord. So, I called up the company that handles the press fleet and asked them about it, thinking that maybe just somebody forgot. And no, believe it or not, you have to pay extra as a customer, as a person. If you buy one of these vehicles, they charge you extra. So, unless the vehicle is optioned out with the charge cord, you don't have it. So this ID Buzz that they sent me is another case of that. It does not have a charge cord. If you want a charge cord, it's going to cost you about $700 extra to have it. Now, just from my point of view as a car journalist who doesn't live downtown, the problem now is that, I've got 144 miles of driving range, and if my experience yesterday is indicative of how much actual driving range I've got, it's going to wind up being considerably less than 144 miles by the time I drive down the mountain, as we say here locally, into Roanoke, which is the kind of next big town close to me, and back. So what then? So here's my Hobson's choice. If I just go down to the gym, that's where I'm headed, and then drive back home, I'm only going to have enough range left probably to barely make it one way back down to Roanoke, or more finally, the driver will barely have, the press driver who picks up the vehicle will barely have that much range left, and I won't be able to drive the car for the rest of the week that I'm supposed to have it. So in order to avoid this thing just basically being a 6,000 pound driveway ornament, I'm not making that up, by the way, that's the curb weight, 6,000 pounds, I'm gonna have to go to one of these fast chargers and instill some charge in it that way. I think that they're trying to encourage people to do that for some reason, and I think that that's a bad idea for a number of reasons. Obviously because of the time suck. Yeah, the fast charger is fast relative to what it takes to charge the vehicle at home. But look, if I had plugged this thing in last night, if I'd been able to do that, even on just a 120 volt standard household type outlet, I would have probably had another 30 miles of range. More than enough probably to compensate for me going down to the gym, coming back home, and then I plug it in. In other words, I would have been able to just drive it without having to go down to a fast charger. So I'm going to have to go down to the fast charger now, where I'll have to sit for a minimum of a half an hour just to get a partial charge, probably longer than that. It depends on the charger, and it also is limited by the rate at which a lithium-ion battery can be charged. They all limit that to about 80% of charge capacity to prevent damage to the battery and the possibility of a fire. So, if you want the full charge, you're going to sit there for like an hour. Who has time for that? Now granted, you still have to wait at home, so to speak, and that if you needed the vehicle while it's charging, you're still going to wait for it, but you're at home. You can do things, you can work, you can watch TV, whatever, but when you're stuck at a fast charging station, what are you doing? Well, you're waiting at a fast charging station, which is typically, like in my case, at a shopping mall parking lot. Oh joy, I'm going to sit at a shopping mall parking lot for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Nobody wants to have to do that. The other thing, though, is objective, and it's important, and I've talked about this before, and it is that regularly using the fast charger isn't good for the battery. It subjects the battery to the additional stress that reduces its useful service life. It's not just my opinion. If you follow my stuff, you'll know at one point I actually read verbatim from one of the owner's manuals of an EV that talked about how you ought not to fast charge regularly because it's not good for the health of the battery. That's what they call it, the health. And what they mean by that is its capacity to accept and retain charge. So when that begins to deplete, you've got a big problem because the EV isn't really useful if it can't hold a charge, is it? So then you got to replace the battery. And EV batteries are spectacularly expensive. You know, $5,000 on the low end, $10,000, $15,000, or even more on the high end. And you know, most people don't even have the cash for that, leaving aside the just sheer size of a bill like that. So then they're going to have to put it on the credit card, I guess, and finance it at 19, 20% or more interest. And it's just not, as the Greens like to say, sustainable. Anyway, circling back to this whole power cord thing, I'm just astounded that they wouldn't put a charge cord in the thing as standard equipment. I mean, it's kind of like dropping off a car and leaving it up on blocks and saying, oh, yeah, the tires are an extra cost option and this vehicle doesn't come equipped with tires. To me, it really attacks like one of the few things that you can say about EVs that is kind of an advantage. I mean, it's not to me, but I can understand why some people would think it is, which is that, hey, I don't have to stop for gas anymore. Not that it's a big inconvenience to have to stop for 5 minutes and fill your tank up if, you know, you're driving a conventional car. But hey, you know, okay, I come home, I just plug in my EV, and the next morning it'll be charged up. And it actually would be charged up, by the way, if you had your house hooked up for a level 2 240 volt system. Of course, you got to pay for that too, don't you? Anyway, the point is that that's like one of the conveniences of owning an EV. And by not including that cord, they're taking that away from people. And I also think that it was a big mistake for the manufacturers, meaning Volkswagen and Acura in this case, to send out press vehicles without these charge cords, because what does it do? It ends up having journalists like me complain about the fact that they couldn't charge the thing at home, and now, you know, they're going to have to go down to some stupid shopping mall and sit there for a half hour, for an hour, wasting time they don't really have to waste. Anyway, those are my latest thoughts about the ID Buzz. More over at EPautos.com, the web's best libertarian gearhead site. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to fill you in also on the mileage again, the actual versus indicated, you know, range and versus how far I've actually driven in my next video. So stay tuned for that, and thanks as always for listening, and we'll be back in a bit.